Now, let's talk about Plato versus Aristotle. Aristotle was Plato's disciple, as you already know, yet he did not agree with him completely. So, before studying Aristotle in detail in the next lecture, let us briefly understand the major areas where the two thinkers agreed or disagreed. The picture that I have presented in front of you is by Raphael. Raphael, he brilliantly uses body languages to capture the entire philosophical difference between Plato and Aristotle without the need of a lengthy explanation. So, this picture is a famous Renaissance painting that you see over here from the school of Athens that is made by Raphael. So, this is not just a pose that you are seeing over here, it's actually a visual representation of two completely different ways of understanding. Plato's gesture, as you can see, is pointing upwards, isn't it? So the man over here, the old man that you can see is Plato, and his left hand is pointing, towards the sky. So what does it mean? Plato believed that the real truth is not in the physical world. The material world around us is temporary and it is imperfect. The highest reality, it exists in the world of ideas, forms, eternal truth. So his upward gesture means that truth is above the earthly world. Okay. Reality exists in the spiritual and the intellectual realm. So look beyond the physical world or the physical object. Example that he gave of the chair that is imperfect that I have already dealt about. Now, in this picture, you see a younger man whose hand is right stretched. His hand is outwards towards the ground, which shows that he is saying that truth can be found in the real world itself. We learn through observations, experiences, science, practical life. So his gesture means that study the world around you. Reality, it exists on the earth itself. Knowledge, it comes from experience. So Plato's finger, it shows metaphysical thinking, whereas Aristotle hand, it shows the practical realism. Okay, now we are going to talk about Plato versus Aristotle. Plato's view is that art as painting is an appearance or an illusion. So Plato, he viewed art as an imitation, as something which is false, which has no real value. It misleads people. But Aristotle, on the other hand, says that he rejects this idea of Plato. He says that even if art imitates, artist adds creativity to it. They add beauty, they add meaning. So that is why art is valuable. So we can see the key difference that Plato says that art is a copy, but Aristotle says that art is actually a creative representation of God. Is that clear? So I've written it down for you. Plato views that art as painting is an appearance and illusion. Plato compares art to painting. And according to him, a painter only shows the surface appearance of the object. He paints how something looks, not what truly that object is about. The painting, it captures only one angle or one aspect of the thing that is there. So therefore, art is superficial, it is illusionary, it is concerned only with appearance and not reality. So this is why Plato says that it is twice removed from reality. Whereas Aristotle views art as poetry. So this you have to keep in mind. Plato compares art to painting, whereas Aristotle views art as poetry and says that he strongly disagrees to Plato. And while Plato compares art to painting, Aristotle compares art to poetry. So according to Aristotle, art, especially poetry, is not just copying appearances. It presents the human actions, emotions, and the experiences. It also explores the universal truth. Therefore, art is creative, it is meaningful, and it is also valuable. So, Plato studies art from a moral point of view, but Aristotle, he studies art from the aesthetic point of view. Next is Plato views art is imitation. Art is false and it is deceptive. It has no real value. It misleads people. Whereas Aristotle views that, he argues that even though art is imitation, it imitates, it does not merely just copy. Okay, according to him, the artist adds creativity, beauty, meaning to it. Therefore, art has more value and significance. So, Aristotle is the first person to deal literature in an aesthetic point of view, whereas Plato, he deals it with moral basis. Keep this in mind. Plato says that art as painting or appearance in his work, The Republic. So, Plato often compares poetry to painting to emphasize that art is merely a surface imitation. He argues that, painter, they depict only the appearance of an object, like a chair, from just one angle, making it an imitation of an imitation. That is a copy of the physical object, which itself is a copy of the form that is there in your head. So, therefore, for Plato, art is twice removed from reality and it deals with illusion. Aristotle, on the other hand, you have to keep in mind that he deals it art as poetry. He says that in his work Poetics, that poetry, especially tragedy, he mentions especially tragedy as a structured imitation of human actions and emotion, rather than just showing the visuals or just surface copy. While painting might focus on color and form, Aristotle suggests that poetry and fine art generally is more akin to music, focusing on the representation of the inner passions and universal truth. So you have to keep this point that Aristotle views art, he is focusing art as a painting, and Aristotle is viewing art as a poetry. Plato, art as a painting, Aristotle, art as a poetry. And he says that, art is deceptive, it imitates the surface level. Whereas Aristotle says that, art is more creative, it imitates the action that you see. He says, Plato says that, art is twice removed from reality, whereas Aristotle says that it explores the universal truth. Okay, so Plato is viewing art in a more negative way, whereas Aristotle, he views art in a more positive or defensive way. So, although human naturally learn from imitation, Plato insists that reality itself is imperfect. So, what is perfect? The idea that we have in our mind, the thought that we have in our mind is the perfect thing. And when we put it in front of us, it is imperfect. Okay, art imitates this imperfect reality. Therefore, art becomes imitation and imitation of imitation. So, hence, art is twice, or we can also say as thrice removed from reality. So, therefore, art should not be valued at the source of truth or knowledge, as it moves people away from the reality rather than towards it. Now, let's talk about Plato's theory of form. So, this is Plato's most famous philosophical idea, theory of form. So, according to Plato, there are two kinds of reality. So, what we see around us is not the ultimate truth. The real truth is, the world of ideas or the world of form. So one, he says, is the physical world, which is the visible world in front of us. So this world we can see, we can touch, hear, feel. For example, you can touch a pen, you can feel a pen. There is chair which you can touch, mobile phones, laptops. So all these comes under the visible or the physical world. So according to Plato, this physical thing, it keeps on changing constantly. Today you are having this phone, tomorrow some other phone will be there, which will be the perfect phone. For example, when I was in my teenage, I used to see as iPhone as something which is very prestigious. I thought, oh my god, if I have Apple phone, I'll be so rich, I'll feel so rich. But now, after having that phone, you feel that okay, right now, Apple 10 is good, then iPhone 11 becomes more in the trend, then iPhone 13 becomes more in the trend. Nowadays, even if you're having Apple 15 or 16, it always keeps, so the trend always keeps on changing. Okay, so the new phone, it becomes old. The chair that you thought once that, oh my God, I wanted to have that kind of chair, it is so cushiony, it is so good, then it breaks later on. Then flowers that you have, the most beautiful flowers, they dry up. Human beauty also fades up. So according to Plato, these physical things that are around us, they changes constantly, they become old, they break, they decay, they die also. So therefore he says that physical objects are imperfect, they are temporary, they are unreliable. So Plato does not trust on the senses. Okay, so according to Plato, he says that eyes are, they deceive us. Senses, they create an illusion in front of us. Okay, example, you would have seen when you were reading physics and all that, you would have learned that a stick, when we put it in a glass of water, it seems, bent, it doesn't seem straight, it actually bends. Okay, a mirage that you see in front when you are going on a plain road in the afternoon, you would see that there is, on the surface there is water, but it is not real, it's actually a mirage that you are seeing. So dreams also, when you are sleeping, it feels real, right? So all these are what, these senses, they actually deceive us at times. So therefore these senses cannot be the complete truth. So Plato believes that mind and intellect is actually something that you will rely upon. These senses are something which is unreliable. Next comes your intelligible world, or also called as world of forms. So this is the most important part of Plato's philosophy. According to Plato, this is beyond the physical world. There exists a higher reality, a world of perfect ideas, forms. So this world, it cannot be touched, it cannot be physically seen, it can only be understood mentally. Plato says that this is the real world that we talk about. So what are forms? Forms means something which is, perfect idea, pure concept, eternal pattern that you see. So they are all non-material, they are abstract, they are unchanging, they are the perfect things. So they never decay, they never become old, they never get corrupted also. So Plato says that every physical object is only a copy of the ideal form. The ideal from that exists the first, the idea that exists in your mind first. So the physical object, it comes later on from your idea. So physical objects are usually imperfect copies. Physical things, they break, they change, they become damaged, have defects in them. Example, that no chair is perfect. Every time when the trend changes, the chair changes. Every time the phone changes, or every time the trend of the phone changes, it becomes imperfect. Now you want another phone. Okay, and no human beings is also perfectly beautiful, but the perfect idea, it exists in the world of form. So the world we see is only a shadow. The real world is the world of perfect forms. So according to Plato, this is the real world, the world of forms. So Plato believes that he gives a greater importance to intelligible world rather than the physical world. He believes that the physical world is not important. The real importance lies in the world of forms, the abstract, the mental world, the metaphysical reality. And one thing you have to keep in mind, that the world of forms cannot be seen or touched, can only be understood mentally. So Plato says that only this world represents the true reality. So what is the nature of form? So this only I have elaborated for you, that the form means pure, something which is pure, perfect, free from corruption, free from, any defect. So therefore, form, it represents absolute and perfect reality. And physical world is the opposition of that form. The physical world is a copy of the ideal form. It is imperfect, it is changing. So therefore, it is not true reality. So the world we see around us is not the real world. The real world is the idea that we have in our mind. So again, the same in I've just written it down for you so that there is no confusion. You can just read it by yourself. The same examples. For example, before making a pen, someone would have imagined it. Before creating a phone, someone would have thought of it. So that idea that that person had was the original thing, and something related to that they have made in front of them, that object, so it is a copy of the idea that they had. So physical objects are like mirror copies of the idea. However, they are imperfect, they are corrupted, and they are less reliable. So, division of the reality, physical form, that is visible world, visible and sensory, constantly changing. They are not fixed, they changes in their shape, color, design. So, therefore, they are unreliable. Abstract form are intelligible world. They are understood through intellect. They are not visible. Characteristics are that they are pure, they are perfect, eternal, unchanging. So, once an idea is formed, it remains perfect and forever. So, real world exists in the mind. Physical world is the copy and it is imperfect, and the abstract world is pure and it is perfect. So therefore, trust the intellect, that is intelligible world, and do not trust the senses, which is the visible world. So now let's talk about two important concepts: phantasm and semblance. They both deal with how things appear to us, but there is an important difference between them. Sometimes our senses they completely deceive us. Sometimes the object is real, but it only resembles something else. So the difference is the key to understand phantasm and semblance. Phantasm is something which is an illusion, which is a false image, something which is illusionary perception of an object. So, here in this, we are going to talk about what is the key difference between phantasm and semblance. Phantasm is an illusion, it's a false image, it's an illusionary perception of an object. Phantasm is something which is, a false perception that is created by our senses. So, phantasm, it believes that, something is real, but it is actually not real. For example, our eyes, ears, or senses, they actually deceive us into seeing something which is not real. Phantasm is actually an illusionary perception of an object in which the image is distorted by our five senses. The object will appear, real in front of you, but it is actually false. So the senses, they create deception. The object may, see that it is existing in front of you, but it is not there. So our sensory experiences is actually misleading us. For example, you would have seen a mirage. So this mirage scene in the movies also you would have seen where a thirsty traveler, he sees a water far away in the desert and he runs towards it, but when he reaches there, there is no water. Why? Because the eyes created an illusion. The water, it actually never existed. That is phantasm. The distorted images also, when you go to a fair, sometimes you look tall, you look short, at times you look fat, at times you look thin, but our body has actually not changed. So the mirror creates a false appearance in front of you. Again, that is phantasm. So phantasm is completely false perception that is created by the senses. The object is not truly present over there, but the senses, it has deceived us. It is a pure illusion that we see in front of us. So there is apparent likeness, there is resemblance, similar kind of appearance, but it is not real. Next is semblance. What is semblance now? For example, you would have seen an actor. Suddenly you look in and you see that, oh my God, he looks like Shah Rukh Khan. But is he real Shah Rukh Khan? No. So, but later on, you realize that no, this person, it actually only resembles like him. This is not the real person. So, the confusion, it comes from the resemblance. So, resemblance and semblance. So, both are, kind of similar. So, somebody who is having a similar facial expression, or somebody who's having similar facial features, so might be a stranger, he resembles your friend or a family member. So for a moment you will think that they are the same person that you've seen, but actually they are only similar in the appearance. So this is also semblance. So you have to keep in mind that semblance, when we talk about phantasm, the object, it is not there. But in semblance, the object is actually there in front of you. It is the real object. When we talk about the nature of phantasm, phantasm means something, illusion. But semblance means something which is, it resembles that way. For example, you can keep in mind to learn about phantasm, mirage. It is not there, but you will feel from your senses, you feel that it is actually there, like mirage. But semblance, on the other hand, for example, Shah Rukh Khan, somebody who will resemble like Shah Rukh Khan, but he is not there. Then phantasm is something, a false perception in front of you, but semblance is a partial confusion that is there. So in easy words, I have to put in the phantasm and semblance. So it is that something, phantasm means that, something which is an illusion or a false image, but semblance is something which is real, which is there in front of us, but we confuse whether it is actual the real one, or is it somebody who is resembling it. So here phantasm is completely false perception, the object does not exist at all. Okay. And semblance is the real object with similarity. It is partially confusing, but it is not, truly false. It is partial confusion that we have. I've also put a table in front of you so that it is more clear. Phantasm not real, semblance real, it really exists. Okay. And phantasm, it is an illusion, but semblance, it is just a resemblance. Okay, some similarity. Phantasm, it is false, it is completely false, it does not exist. Whereas semblance, it is partly true, at little it appears like that, but little it does not also. This is important. Mirage, keep in mind, then you'll never forget between phantasm and semblance. So mirage is the example of phantasm. And look-alike, somebody who's a look-alike like Shah Rukh Khan, then Salman Khan, look-alikes, that is the semblance. So pure illusion is phantasm, confusion is semblance. Okay. So now let's talk about one of the Plato's earliest and most interesting dialogue, Ion. So before Plato completely attacks poetry in the Republic, the first, he begins by asking a very important question. How do poets create poetry? Do they write it through knowledge and skill, or is it through any divine inspiration? So to explore this question, Plato creates a conversation between Socrates and Ion. Socrates is the philosopher, and Ion is a famous performer of the poems of Homer. So there are two main characters, Socrates, and the other one is Ion or Ion, who is a rhapsody. Now, what is a rhapsody? A rhapsody is a performer or a reciter of poetry. So in earlier times, writers, written content was not very common. So poets, they used to recite poetry orally and they used to perform it in front of the audience. So especially these rhapsodies, they performed the works of Homer, such as Iliad and Odyssey. So a rhapsody was not an original poet, but actually a public performer, or we could say him as an interpreter or a reciter of poetry. So Ion or Ion believed that he is an expert in poetry and nobody can explain, Homer better than him. But Socrates, he slowly, starts asking question to him. If you truly possess knowledge, why can you speak only about Homer? Why not about other poets? This becomes a very central issue in the dialogue because real knowledge should, be universal. A true expert should understand poetry generally and not only about just one single poet. So Socrates begins doubting whether Ion is truly having knowledge or whether it is simply an emotionally inspired person. And from this simple conversation, Plato opens a deeper philosophical debate about poetry, about inspiration, art, knowledge, and truth. So, in this dialogue, Plato is merely discussing poetry. He is examining whether poetry is actually based on wisdom or only just emotional inspiration. So, the dialogue it discusses the skill of a rhapsody, poetry and poetic performances, artistic inspiration, knowledge versus emotion, truth and imagination. It examines how poets they recite poetry so beautifully, why audience they become emotionally affected, and whether this poetry it comes from knowledge or is it some divine inspiration. Socrates over here challenges this idea whether poets possess true wisdom. Poets, according to Plato, he has this philosophical view that poets they do not speak from their rational knowledge. They deal more with imagination, emotions, appearances, and illusion. So therefore, poetry may move people emotionally, but it does not necessarily teach any truth. So this idea of divine possession. So one of the most famous idea of this iron you will learn about is that poets are divinely possessed. According to the dialogue, Plato asked this question whether these poets are divinely possessed. Means when they write or recite a poetry, are they under a divine influence or an inspiration, a kind of possession or some supernatural emotional forces? Because according to Socrates, the poet does not create through logic alone. Instead, the poet becomes a medium through which divine power speaks. So Socrates he explains this idea using something which is very similar to what we see in our societies also. For example, some people will say that God has entered them, a divine force is speaking through them, or a person suddenly starts behaving very differently, as if he has lost control and there is some external power that has possessed him. So Plato he uses this idea only as an analogy to explain the poetic inspiration. It should not be taken something very literally, but rather philosophically. So, I just gave you this example. In our societies also we would have seen people like this who claims that they are possessed by some divine power. So Socrates, Plato's criticism of poetry. Now, this is really confusing whether it is Plato's real or Plato's viewpoint on poetry, or is it from the point of view of Socrates? Is it like Socrates' real point of view, or is it Plato's point of view on poetry? So Socrates, representing as Plato's views, argues that poets they do not write using knowledge. They are actually inspired, they are possessed, and they are driven by emotions and imagination. So that is why poetry is irrational, it is emotional, and it is not at all logical. It is not a form of true knowledge. So the central question that arises over here is that the dialogue it finally raises this important philosophical question, that are poets truly divinely inspired, or are they simply using creative imagination? So this question it remains open throughout the dialogue. Okay, so the final conclusion is, or the final insight we can say, is that a dialogue does not give a final clear answer. Instead, Plato he leaves the readers thinking about the origin of poetry, the artistic creativity, and the relationship between inspiration, imagination, and real knowledge. So at the end, the dialogue suggests that poets they do not possess true philosophical knowledge. They are actually guided more by inspiration, by emotions, imagination, and divine influence. Thus, Plato begins his larger criticism of poetry, which later you will see that becomes more stronger in the Republic. Now, let's talk about another important dialogue that is written by Plato, which is Phaedrus. This dialogue is important because Plato over here discusses about rhetoric, about communication, speech, writing, and power of knowledge. So the main discussion happens here between Socrates and Phaedrus. So these two are the main characters, Socrates and Phaedrus. The focus of the dialogue is about, it focuses mainly on rhetoric, that is the art of speaking effectively. Okay, the art of persuading somebody, having a very good communication. And the difference that he has talked about is spoken communication and written communication, whether speech is better or whether writing is better. So he talks about, he debates about speech and writing. So he raises this question, that which is better, spoken communication or written communication? So this debate has continued for centuries, and even today people still discuss about it, whether classroom teaching is better or whether reading written materials alone is, enough for you. So talking about his views on speech, he says that, speech is something which is more superior. Why? Because speech is more dynamic, it is more alive, it is more interactive, it's flexible, it is more adaptable. You can adapt according, seeing your audience in front of you, and you can change your speech, your speed according to that. And in spoken communication, the speaker can, explain ideas, differently. If you have not understood one idea, the speaker can explain it more nicely by giving you some other idea. They give examples, they answer the doubts, the questions, and changes according to the audience that is in front of them. If a student do not understand, the teacher will immediately clarify the doubts. So according to Plato, speech, becomes more engaging, it is more understandable, and it is more effective. Example, as I already gave you, of the real classroom. Right now, while teaching, a teacher can change the tone, give real life experiences, examples, simplify the difficult concepts. If the student is not able to understand, can repeat the important points again and again. So this makes the learning more easier. So speech therefore becomes a kind of active communication. Now, let's talk about written communication. According to Plato, writing is something which is limited. Why? Because writing, it is fixed, it is static, it is silent, and it is not at all interactive. Once something is written, it remains same forever. So writing cannot answer your questions, it cannot defend itself, it cannot clarify the misunderstanding. So that is why Plato thinks that writing is weak, because Socrates, who is the character, he says that writing only appears wise but cannot truly teach, like, living speeches. If a reader misunderstands, the text cannot explain itself. Unlike speech, writing cannot respond in real time. Therefore, Plato sees writing as something which is a passive kind of communication. So that is why he says that speech is superior. According to Plato, speech is more alive, whereas writing is dead. Because in speech, the ideas, they move dynamically between the people. The speakers can persuade, emotionally connect, clarify, and interact directly. So speech becomes more powerful for teaching, understanding, and philosophical discussions. So Plato, he criticizes writing, yet he himself wrote this dialogue. Why? Because Plato tries to make writing feel like living conversation between the dialogue. So that is why most of his works are written as in the form of a conversation, not just, dry essays. So the dialogue finally suggests that writing is useful, but it is limited, whereas speech is more effective for learning, for philosophy, for teaching, and even for communication. So spoken communication is superior to written communication because speech is interactive, it is living, it is flexible, and it is intellectually engaging. So do share your comments in the chat box whether you prefer speech or you prefer writing.